Your soulmate asked God to marry you. The answer will leave you stunned. Don't scroll, listen to this. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because if this title stopped you, if your breath changed even slightly, that was not curiosity, that was recognition. And listen closely, because somewhere, in a quiet moment you weren't meant to see, your soulmate spoke your name to God, not casually, not impulsively, but with weight, with seriousness, with a trembling kind of hope that only comes when love feels sacred. And don't scroll, listen to this, because when a soulmate asks God about marriage, it's not about wanting to possess you, it's about wanting to honor you, and your heart needs this right now, because you've lived through connections that felt intense but unsafe, passionate but unstable. And listen carefully, because this prayer came from a different place, a place of humility, of God, if this is meant, shape me so I don't break what I love. And don't scroll, listen to this, because that kind of prayer doesn't come from loneliness, it comes from recognition, and your heart needs this right now, because recognition feels calm before it feels exciting, steady before it feels joyful. And listen closely, because you may have felt a strange calm settling into your life recently, not happiness exactly, but peace, like something heavy you didn't know you were carrying has been gently set down. And don't scroll, listen to this, because peace is the first sign God is involved, not chaos, not obsession, not anxiety disguised as passion. And your heart needs this right now, because peace prepares the heart for covenant-level love. And listen carefully, because as that prayer was spoken, the universe responded not with noise, but with alignment. And don't scroll, listen to this, because alignment often looks like quiet changes. Your standards rising, your tolerance for emotional games disappearing, your desire for depth replacing your patience for surface-level connections. And your heart needs this right now, because those shifts are not you becoming distant, they are you becoming ready. And listen closely, because you may have started noticing signs from the universe more often, angel numbers appearing at moments that feel personal. 11. 11 when your thoughts drift to long-term love or commitment. 222 when doubt tries to whisper that you're imagining things. 444 when you feel protected even without answers. And don't scroll, listen to this, because those numbers are not random, they are confirmations that something is being worked out on both sides, even if words haven't been exchanged yet. And your heart needs this right now, because alignment always happens before union. And listen carefully, because the answer God gave your soulmate wasn't rushed, it wasn't dramatic, and it wasn't a simple yes or no. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God often answers marriage prayers with instruction, not instant results. And your heart needs this right now, because the instruction included preparation, and preparation is what's happening in your life right now, even if you didn't connect the dots yet. And listen closely, because preparation looks like healing old wounds you thought you were done with, forgiving yourself for staying too long in places that couldn't love you fully, releasing timelines that were built from fear instead of faith. And don't scroll, listen to this, because preparation also looks like protection. And your heart needs this right now, because you may have noticed certain distractions losing their pull, certain connections fading without conflict, certain doors closing without you having to force them shut. And listen carefully, because God removes what would compete with what He's preparing. And don't scroll, listen to this, because soulmate energy does not disappear during silence or distance, it deepens, it matures, it aligns quietly beneath the surface. And your heart needs this right now, because this is not a season of chasing, it's a season of trusting. And listen closely, because trust feels very different from hope, it's quieter, steadier, less desperate. And don't scroll, listen to this, because you may have noticed a name surfacing gently in your thoughts, not obsessively, not intrusively, just consistently. And your heart needs this right now because God doesn't place names on hearts to confuse them, He places them to prepare them, and listen carefully, because preparation keeps you from forcing outcomes, and forcing has never brought you peace. And don't scroll, listen to this, because peace is how God confirms you're being guided, not tested, and your heart needs this right now because tests feel heavy and draining, while guidance feels supportive and grounding. And listen closely, because the reason the answer will leave you stunned is not because it's dramatic, but because it's simple, and simplicity feels shocking when you've lived through complicated love. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God's yes often arrives as peace before it arrives as circumstance, and your heart needs this right now because peace prepares you to receive without fear. And listen carefully, because you are not meant to chase this love. You are meant to recognize it when the timing aligns, and don't scroll, listen to this, because recognition feels like familiarity, like, I know this energy, even if the situation feels new, and your heart needs this right now because familiarity is the language of soul connections, not fireworks that burn out quickly. And listen closely, because fireworks fade, but familiarity deepens. And don't scroll, listen to this, because this part ends here intentionally, not to leave you anxious, but to let this truth settle gently into your body. The truth that a prayer has been spoken, an answer has begun unfolding, and preparation is already happening in both lives, even if you can't see the full picture yet. And your heart needs this right now to trust that what God is aligning for you will not rush you, will not confuse you, and will not cost you your peace. And don't scroll, listen to this, because when the moment comes, the clarity will feel natural, the connection will feel safe, and the answer will make sense in a way your soul has been quietly ready for all along. Don't scroll, listen to this. This message is for you, and if you came back for this part, your heart needs this right now because this is where the universe begins to confirm what your soul has already felt but your mind keeps questioning. And listen closely, because when a soulmate asks God about marriage, the answer doesn't just land in one heart, it ripples through both lives quietly, subtly, in ways that feel emotional before they ever feel logical. And don't scroll, listen to this, because since that prayer was spoken, something has been shifting inside you whether you noticed it or not, and your heart needs this right now because you may have felt more reflective lately, more aware of what you will and won't accept, more sensitive to energy, tone, intention. And listen carefully, because sensitivity is not weakness, it's spiritual awakening. And don't scroll, listen to this, because awakening often begins after someone prays over you with pure intentions, and your heart needs this right now because you didn't imagine this shift, it was activated. And listen closely, because God doesn't answer prayers about marriage with shortcuts, He answers them with alignment, and alignment always starts internally before it shows up externally. And don't scroll, listen to this, because alignment feels like calm replacing chaos, clarity replacing confusion, and peace replacing the old emotional roller coaster you once thought was love. And your heart needs this right now because you've mistaken intensity for destiny before. And listen to this truth, destiny does not drain you, it stabilizes you. And don't scroll, listen to this, because stabilization can feel unfamiliar when your nervous system is used to unpredictability. And your heart needs this right now because unfamiliar does not mean wrong, it means healed. And listen closely, because the universe has been sending you confirmations through signs, not to excite you, but to steady you. And don't scroll, listen to this, Because angel numbers have likely been appearing with purpose. 1111 when you think about long-term commitment or a shared future. 222 when doubt tries to convince you that you're reading too much into things. 444 when you feel protected without knowing why. And your heart needs this right now because these numbers are not promises, they are reassurances, telling you that what's being prepared is not fragile. And listen carefully, because reassurance comes before revelation. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God doesn't reveal answers before hearts are strong enough to receive them without panic. And your heart needs this right now because panic distorts perception. And listen closely, because what you're being given right now is grounding, not excitement, and grounding allows love to grow roots instead of burning out quickly. And don't scroll, listen to this, because roots are invisible at first, but they hold everything later. And your heart needs this right now because you've been in connections that grew fast and collapsed just as quickly. And listen to this truth, God builds slowly because He builds to last. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the answer God gave your soulmate involved timing, not delay. And your heart needs this right now because timing protects what's sacred. And listen closely, because protection may feel like nothing is happening, when in reality everything is being arranged beneath the surface. And don't scroll, listen to this, because you may have noticed doors closing without conflict, people fading without explanation, distractions losing their emotional grip. And your heart needs this right now because God removes what would compete with what He's preparing. And listen carefully, because soulmate level love does not fight for attention, it arrives when there is space. And don't scroll, listen to this, because space is being created in your life right now, emotionally, spiritually, and energetically. And your heart needs this right now because space allows recognition instead of attachment. And listen closely, because recognition feels different than attraction. It feels familiar, safe, grounding, like your body relaxes instead of braces. And don't scroll, listen to this, because your body already knows what your mind is still trying to understand. And your heart needs this right now because the body responds to safety before the mind understands it. And listen carefully, because you may have felt drawn to pray more, reflect more, or sit in silence more lately. And don't scroll, listen to this, because silence is where God speaks most clearly. And your heart needs this right now because clarity doesn't come through overthinking, it comes through stillness. And listen closely, because the answer God gave your soulmate wasn't, yes, now, it was, yes, when both hearts are ready. And don't scroll, listen to this, because readiness is not about perfection, it's about stability. And your heart needs this right now because stability allows love to breathe instead of suffocate. And listen carefully, because you may have noticed your reactions changing, you pause before responding. You feel less triggered, less reactive. And don't scroll, listen to this, because that's not coincidence, that's preparation. And your heart needs this right now because God refines emotional regulation before He brings covenant-level love. And listen closely, because covenant is not about romance alone, it's about partnership, responsibility, and shared direction. And don't scroll, listen to this, because shared direction requires clarity of values, not just feelings. And your heart needs this right now because your values have been sharpening lately. And listen carefully, because you're no longer willing to sacrifice peace for connection, or truth for attention. And don't scroll, listen to this, because that shift is essential. And your heart needs this right now because God does not bring aligned partners to misaligned hearts. And listen closely, because you are becoming aligned, not because you tried harder, but because you surrendered control. And don't scroll, listen to this, Because surrender feels like trust replacing urgency, and your heart needs this right now because urgency once pushed you into misalignment. And listen carefully, because this season is not about chasing answers, it's about embodying readiness. And don't scroll, listen to this, because embodiment attracts clarity without effort, and your heart needs this right now because effort once exhausted you. And listen closely, because love that comes from God does not exhaust, it energizes. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the reason the answer will leave you stunned is because it will feel obvious in hindsight, like realizing the pieces were always moving toward each other even when you thought nothing was happening. And your heart needs this right now because hindsight clarity is gentle, not shocking. And listen carefully, because the shock will come from how right it feels, not how dramatic it looks. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God's answers do not arrive with chaos. They arrive with peace that makes sense, and your heart needs this right now because sense has been missing from past love. And listen closely, because this part ends here intentionally, not to leave you wanting, but to let this truth anchor you. The truth that preparation is still unfolding, alignment is still deepening, and what has been prayed over is being protected. And don't scroll, listen to this, because what God is bringing together will not require you to abandon yourself, rush your healing, or silence your intuition. And your heart needs this right now to trust that the answer is already in motion, even if the timing hasn't revealed itself yet. And when it does, it will feel like peace recognizing peace, not confusion demanding explanation. Don't scroll, listen to this. This message is for you, and if you are still here, your heart needs this right now because this is the moment where what was prayed in secret begins to echo in your life in ways you can no longer ignore. And listen closely, because when a soulmate asks God about marriage, the answer does not arrive as a single event, it arrives as a process, a holy unfolding that touches timing, character, healing, and readiness on both sides. And don't scroll, listen to this, because lately you may have felt a deeper stillness inside you, not emptiness, but calm, the kind of calm that comes after storms you never thought you'd survive. And your heart needs this right now because that calm is not accidental, it is evidence that something sacred is being prepared. And listen carefully, because spiritual preparation often feels like emotional quiet after years of noise. And don't scroll, listen to this, because quiet can feel unsettling when you're used to emotional chaos, but quiet is where God does his clearest work. And your heart needs this right now because clarity is forming in the silence. And listen closely, because divine numbers have likely been appearing with more intention now, not randomly, not urgently, but rhythmically. And don't scroll, listen to this, because if 1111 keeps showing up, especially when you are calm or reflective, 11 at this stage is divine recognition, alignment locking in, God saying, you are seeing with spiritual eyes now. And your heart needs this right now because spiritual sight replaces confusion with understanding. And listen carefully, because 222 may be appearing when you question whether peace means stagnation, and 222 is reassurance that balance is being protected intentionally, that nothing is slipping away just because you're not forcing it. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God does not require anxiety to move things forward. And your heart needs this right now because anxiety once masqueraded as care in your life. And listen closely, because 333 may be appearing during emotional release, moments of tenderness, tears without heaviness, gratitude mixed with longing. And 333 is divine companionship, a reminder that you are not walking this unfolding alone, that God is actively involved in every detail. And don't scroll, listen to this, because companionship from God feels like reassurance, not pressure, and your heart needs this right now because pressure once distorted your decisions. And listen carefully, because 444 may be appearing when you make grounded choices, when you choose boundaries over people-pleasing, when you choose rest over reaction, and 444 is protection, confirmation that your foundation is now strong enough to support covenant-level love. And don't scroll. Listen to this, because God does not bring marriage into unstable emotional environments, and your heart needs this right now because stability has been built inside you slowly, intentionally, through lessons you didn't ask for but survived anyway. And listen closely, because 555 may appear when you imagine a future that looks nothing like your past, and 555 is irreversible transformation, God confirming that you are no longer meant to love from wounds, but from wholeness. And don't scroll. Listen to this, because wholeness changes what you attract, and your heart needs this right now because you are no longer magnetized to chaos. And listen carefully, because 666 may show up when fear tries to resurface, whispering doubts like, what if this is just hope, or what if nothing happens? And 666 is recalibration, God gently guiding your thoughts back into alignment, reminding you that fear is an outdated voice, not a prophecy. And don't scroll. Listen to this, because fear always speaks when control is slipping, and your heart needs this right now because control is being replaced with trust. And listen closely, because 777 is the number anchoring this entire season, and 777 means divine confirmation sealed, something spiritually settled even before it manifests physically. And don't scroll. Listen to this, because 777 is God saying, this is held. And your heart needs this right now because being held allows you to stop bracing for disappointment. And listen carefully, because 888 may appear when you reflect on partnership, equality, and shared effort, and 888 is divine balance restored, confirmation that this connection will not require you to overgive, overfunction, or lose yourself to be loved. And don't scroll. Listen to this, because love that requires self-erasure is not God's design. And your heart needs this right now because you are no longer willing to disappear to be chosen. And listen closely, because 999 may appear softly when you feel closure without sadness, completion without grief, and 999 is the end of an old chapter of waiting, guessing, and emotional limbo. And don't scroll. Listen to this, because completion creates space, and space is where revelation arrives gently. And your heart needs this right now because God reveals answers when hearts are spacious enough not to cling, panic, or project. And listen carefully, because the answer God gave your soulmate was not just about timing, it was about readiness. And don't scroll. Listen to this, because readiness is not perfection, it is stability, self-awareness, and the ability to love without fear controlling the outcome. And your heart needs this right now because you have grown into someone who no longer confuses intensity with intimacy. And listen closely, because intimacy feels safe, steady, and grounding, not overwhelming. And don't scroll. Listen to this, because you may have noticed that the idea of marriage now feels less intimidating and more peaceful, less like a loss of freedom and more like shared direction. And your heart needs this right now because that shift did not come from nowhere, it came from preparation. And listen carefully, because preparation often happens quietly, through solitude, reflection, and healing old narratives. And don't scroll. Listen to this, because God often heals the heart before he reveals the partner. And your heart needs this right now because healed hearts recognize alignment without chasing it. And listen closely, Because the person who prayed about marrying you is not asking God to rush the outcome, they are asking God to protect the process. And don't scroll, listen to this, because protection looks like patience, clarity, and peace, and your heart needs this right now because peace is the loudest confirmation God gives. And listen carefully, because the reason the answer will leave you stunned is not because it's dramatic, but because it will feel right in a way you've never experienced before. Like everything finally clicks without effort. And don't scroll, listen to this, because God's answers do not create confusion, they dissolve it, and your heart needs this right now because confusion has been a theme in past love. And listen closely, because clarity is replacing confusion now. And don't scroll, listen to this, because this clarity will not demand immediate action, it will invite calm confidence. And your heart needs this right now because calm confidence is how you recognize something built to last. And listen carefully, because you are not being asked to wait in fear, you are being asked to rest in trust. And don't scroll, listen to this, because rest is not delay, it is preparation completing its work. And your heart needs this right now because preparation protects what God intends to bless. And listen closely, because when the moment comes, through conversation, timing, or sudden recognition, the clarity will feel natural, not shocking, settling instead of destabilizing. And don't scroll, listen to this, because settlement is how God confirms covenant. And your heart needs this right now because covenant-level love does not rush, confuse, or cost you your peace. And listen carefully, because this part ends here not with suspense meant to hook you, but with reassurance meant to ground you. The reassurance that a prayer has been spoken, an answer has been given, and alignment is already unfolding quietly, faithfully, and intentionally. And don't scroll, listen to this, because what has been prayed over is being protected, and what God is bringing together will arrive at the right moment with peace leading the way, not fear, not urgency. And your heart needs this right now to trust that the answer is already moving toward you, even if you can't see it yet. And when it arrives, it will feel like recognition, not surprise, like truth finally standing in front of you. Calm, clear, and undeniable. Don't scroll, listen to this, this message is for you. And if you're here for this next part, your heart needs this right now because this is where the universe begins to translate what has been happening behind the scenes into something your soul can finally rest inside. And listen closely, because when a soulmate asks God about marriage, the unfolding doesn't stop at prayer. It moves into timing, into alignment, into small shifts that seem ordinary until you realize they're not. And don't scroll, listen to this, because lately you may have felt like life slowed down in a strange way, not stuck, not blocked, just quieter, like the noise fell away and left you alone with your thoughts more often than before. And your heart needs this right now because quiet is not emptiness, it's space being made. And listen carefully, because God always clears space before He brings something sacred forward. And don't scroll, listen to this, because you may have noticed that things you once chased no longer excite you, conversations that used to hold your attention now feel shallow, and connections that once felt important don't pull at you the same way. And your heart needs this right now because that's not loss, that's refinement. And listen closely, because refinement happens when the soul is preparing for something deeper than surface-level love. And don't scroll, listen to this, because soulmate-level alignment doesn't compete for attention, it waits until there's room to be received properly. And your heart needs this right now because you're no longer the person who grabs onto love out of fear of losing it. And listen carefully, because fear has been losing its grip on you lately, even if you haven't named it that way. And don't scroll, listen to this, because you may have noticed you're reacting less, observing more, pausing before responding, and your heart needs this right now because pause is where discernment lives. And listen closely, because discernment is what separates destiny from distraction. And don't scroll, listen to this, because you've lived through love that felt urgent, consuming, and confusing, and your heart needs this right now because this is not that, this is quieter, steadier, more grounded. And listen carefully, because when God is involved, love doesn't arrive like a storm, it arrives like a sunrise, slowly, consistently, warming everything it touches without overwhelming you. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the reason this process feels drawn out is not because something is wrong, it's because something is being protected, and your heart needs this right now because protection often feels like delay to the impatient mind, but to the soul it feels like safety. And listen closely, because you may have felt moments of doubt creep in, thoughts like, why hasn't anything happened yet, or, what if I misunderstood? And don't scroll, listen to this, because doubt always shows up when something meaningful is close enough to be felt but not yet seen. And your heart needs this right now because doubt doesn't mean you're wrong, it means you're human. And listen carefully, because God doesn't punish doubt, He answers it with reassurance. And don't scroll, listen to this, because reassurance has been coming to you in subtle ways, through timing that works out unexpectedly, through conversations that don't happen when they would have complicated things, through a sense of being guided away from choices that would have pulled you off course. And your heart needs this right now because guidance doesn't always feel dramatic, it feels gentle, almost easy. And listen closely, because soulmate energy doesn't pull you into confusion, it simplifies your inner world. And don't scroll, listen to this, because simplicity can feel boring when you're used to emotional highs. And your heart needs this right now because boring is not the same as safe. And safe is not the same as dull. Safe is where love can actually grow. And listen carefully, because the prayer that was spoken over you did not ask God to rush anything, it asked God to do it right. And don't scroll, listen to this, because doing it right means timing that honors both hearts, not just desire. And your heart needs this right now because you've learned the cost of rushing, the cost of choosing intensity over alignment. And listen closely, because you are no longer available for love that destabilizes your peace. And don't scroll, listen to this, because peace has become your compass. And your heart needs this right now because when peace leads, confusion falls away. And listen carefully, because you may have noticed your intuition becoming sharper, not louder, but clearer. Like you just know when something isn't for you without needing proof. And don't scroll, listen to this, because that clarity didn't come from nowhere, it came from growth, from lessons, from healing that happened when you thought nothing was happening at all. And your heart needs this right now because God often does His deepest work in seasons that look uneventful from the outside. And listen closely, because this is one of those seasons. And don't scroll, listen to this, because the answer God gave your soulmate included you becoming ready to receive love without suspicion, without bracing for disappointment, without assuming the ending before it begins. And your heart needs this right now because that kind of readiness is rare. And listen carefully, because readiness doesn't mean you don't have fears, it means fear no longer controls your choices. And don't scroll, listen to this, because control has been loosening its grip on you. And your heart needs this right now because control once felt like protection, but now trust feels safer. And listen closely, because trust doesn't ask for constant reassurance, it rests in knowing. And don't scroll, listen to this, because knowing doesn't arrive all at once, it builds quietly, layer by layer, through consistency, through peace, through alignment, and your heart needs this right now because consistency feels different than passion, and listen carefully, because passion burns fast, but consistency builds futures, and don't scroll, listen to this, because the universe has been aligning small details you may not even notice yet, shifting schedules, softening circumstances, preparing conversations that haven't happened, and your heart needs this right now because alignment is precise, not rushed, and listen closely, because soulmate-level love doesn't need chaos to feel alive, it feels alive because it's real, and don't scroll, listen to this, because real love doesn't pull you out of yourself, it brings you home to yourself, and your heart needs this right now because home feels peaceful, not performative, and listen carefully, because you may have noticed that you no longer feel the need to explain yourself as much, justify your boundaries, or convince anyone of your worth, and don't scroll, listen to this, because that shift is essential, and your heart needs this right now because God does not bring covenant-level love to someone who is still negotiating their value, and listen closely, because you are no longer negotiating, you are standing, and don't scroll, listen to this, because standing feels steady, and steady is where partnership begins. And your heart needs this right now because partnership is not about being rescued or rescuing, it's about walking side by side in shared direction, and listen carefully, because shared direction is forming now, even if the path isn't fully visible yet, and don't scroll, listen to this, because visibility comes after alignment, not before, and your heart needs this right now because you're learning to trust the process instead of demanding the outcome, and listen closely. Because the reason the answer will leave you stunned is because it will arrive without forcing, without chasing, without emotional turbulence, and don't scroll, listen to this, because you may look back and realize the signs were always there, the timing always intentional, the delays always protective, and your heart needs this right now because hindsight will bring gratitude, not regret, and listen carefully, because this part ends here not to leave you hanging, but to let this truth settle gently into your spirit, the truth that something has been prayed over, something has been answered, and something is still unfolding in perfect timing, and don't scroll, listen to this, because what is meant for you will not pass you by, will not require you to abandon your peace, and will not arrive in chaos, and your heart needs this right now to trust that when the moment comes, it will feel natural, grounded, and unmistakably right, like the universe finally exhaling and saying, "This is it." Don't scroll, listen to this message is for you, and if you are still here your heart needs this right now because this is the stage where everything you've been feeling begins to make sense, even if you don't yet have all the details. And listen closely because when a soulmate asks God about marriage, the answer doesn't just affect the future, it begins to quietly reshape the present, and don't scroll, listen to this, because you may have noticed that your inner world has been changing. In subtle but undeniable ways, like you're no longer pulled by the same things, no longer triggered by the same fears, no longer willing to entertain connections that feel draining or uncertain, and your heart needs this right now because those shifts are not random, they are the evidence of readiness forming, and listen carefully, because readiness is not about perfection, it's about stability, and don't scroll, listen to this, because stability feels calm, and calm can feel strange when you've lived through love that was loud, chaotic, and unpredictable, and your heart needs this right now because what God prepares does not require chaos to feel real, and listen closely, because you may have felt moments of peace arrive without explanation, moments where your chest feels lighter, your thoughts quieter, your reactions softer, and don't scroll, listen to this, because peace is not boredom, it is alignment settling into your nervous system, and your heart needs this right now. Because alignment allows you to receive love without bracing for pain, and listen carefully, because the prayer spoken over you wasn't answered with fireworks, it was answered with protection. And don't scroll, listen to this, because protection often looks like slow unfolding, not instant gratification, and your heart needs this right now because slow unfolding gives you time to become who you need to be to hold what's coming without fear. And listen closely, because you may have noticed yourself becoming more discerning, not judgmental, just clearer, more aware of energy, more sensitive to intention. And don't scroll, listen to this, because sensitivity is not weakness, it's spiritual maturity, and your heart needs this right now because maturity allows love to grow without confusion. And listen carefully, because you may have felt moments of impatience, wondering why nothing has happened yet, why things feel close but not concrete. And don't scroll, listen to this, because closeness without manifestation is often a sign that alignment is still being refined, not delayed, and your heart needs this right now because refinement protects what God intends to bless. And listen closely, because refinement feels like life simplifying itself, distractions falling away, priorities becoming clearer. And don't scroll, listen to this, because simplicity is where covenant-level love thrives, not in chaos, not in emotional noise, and your heart needs this right now because you are no longer meant for complicated love, you are meant for clear love. And listen carefully, because you may have noticed that your prayers sound different lately, less desperate, more surrendered, less about asking for signs, more about trusting what's already unfolding. And don't scroll, listen to this, because surrender is not giving up, it's handing control back to God. And your heart needs this right now because control once felt like safety, but now trust feels safer. And listen closely, because trust allows God to move without resistance. And don't scroll, listen to this, because resistance often shows up as overthinking, replaying conversations, imagining outcomes. And your heart needs this right now because you may have noticed your mind quieting more easily than before. And listen carefully, because that quiet didn't come from nowhere, it came from healing. And don't scroll, listen to this, because healing doesn't always announce itself, sometimes you only notice it when old triggers no longer pull you in. And your heart needs this right now because those moments are proof that you're becoming ready for love that doesn't wound you. And listen closely, because the answer God gave your soulmate involved timing that honors both of you, not just desire. And don't scroll, listen to this, because honoring timing is how God protects hearts from unnecessary pain. And your heart needs this right now because you've experienced what happens when timing is ignored, when love is rushed, when connection is forced. And listen carefully, because you are no longer willing to repeat those lessons. And don't scroll, listen to this, because your unwillingness to repeat pain is not fear, it's wisdom. And your heart needs this right now because wisdom attracts aligned partners, not lessons disguised as love. And listen closely, because you may have noticed that the idea of marriage no longer feels like pressure, like a loss of freedom, but like partnership, direction, and shared purpose. And don't scroll, listen to this, because that shift didn't come from nowhere, it came from preparation. And your heart needs this right now because preparation is invisible until it's complete. And listen carefully, because God often finishes preparation before he reveals outcomes. And don't scroll, listen to this, because revelation without preparation creates anxiety, not peace. And your heart needs this right now because peace is how you'll recognize what's real. And listen closely, because you may have felt moments of reassurance come through unexpected ways, a conversation that didn't happen when it would have complicated things, a delay that saved you from confusion, a redirection that felt disappointing at first but calming later. And don't scroll, listen to this, because those moments were not setbacks, they were safeguards. And your heart needs this right now because God guards what He intends to grow. And listen carefully, because soulmate level love does not compete with distractions, it arrives when distractions are removed. And don't scroll, listen to this, because removal is happening now, not dramatically, but gently, and your heart needs this right now because gentle removal protects your peace. And listen closely, because you may have noticed that your emotional reactions have softened. You pause instead of reacting, you reflect instead of assuming. And don't scroll, listen to this, because those changes are essential, and your heart needs this right now because covenant-level love requires emotional regulation, not emotional volatility. And listen carefully, because regulation allows you to respond instead of react. And don't scroll, listen to this, because response is where partnership lives. And your heart needs this right now because partnership is not about saving or being saved, it's about walking together in clarity. And listen closely, because clarity doesn't arrive all at once, it builds through consistency, through peace, through alignment. And don't scroll, listen to this, because you are building clarity right now even if you don't feel like anything is happening. And your heart needs this right now because something is happening, it's just happening beneath the surface. And listen carefully, because God often works quietly to avoid interference. And don't scroll, listen to this, because interference comes from fear, impatience, and projection. And your heart needs this right now because you are learning to let go of all three. And listen closely, because letting go does not mean letting go of love, it means letting go of control. And don't scroll, listen to this, because control once led you into misalignment. And your heart needs this right now because alignment feels like trust, not tension. And listen carefully, because the reason the answer will leave you stunned is not because it's dramatic, but because it will feel inevitable in hindsight, like everything had been pointing there all along. And don't scroll, listen to this, because inevitability feels calm, not shocking. And your heart needs this right now because calm is the language of God's yes. And listen closely, because when the moment comes, you won't feel like you're stepping into the unknown, you'll feel like you're stepping into something familiar that's finally ready. And don't scroll, listen to this, because familiarity is the signature of soulmate alignment. Not chaos, not confusion. And your heart needs this right now because you are no longer meant to question your intuition. And listen carefully, because intuition has been guiding you gently this entire time. And don't scroll, listen to this, because this part ends here not to leave you searching, but to let this truth anchor you. The truth that a prayer has been spoken, an answer has been given, and alignment is still unfolding in perfect timing. And your heart needs this right now to trust that nothing meant for you will miss you, nothing sacred will arrive too early or too late. And when it does arrive, it will feel like peace settling into place, like the universe finally whispering, now. Don't scroll, listen to this, this message is for you. And if you've made it to this part, your heart needs this right now because this is where everything you've been carrying quietly begins to land instead of linger. And listen closely, because when a soulmate asks God about marriage, the answer doesn't just move time forward, it settles the soul first. And don't scroll, listen to this, because you may have noticed that the constant questioning has softened, not disappeared completely, but quieted enough for you to breathe again. And your heart needs this right now because that quiet is not emptiness, it's assurance taking root. And listen carefully, because assurance does not announce itself loudly, it wraps around you gently, like a blanket you didn't realize you were missing. and don't scroll, listen to this, because lately you may have felt less reactive, less pulled into emotional spirals, less willing to explain yourself to people who don't truly see you, and your heart needs this right now because those changes are not accidental. They are signs that you are no longer living from survival, you are living from alignment, and listen closely, because alignment feels grounded, not rushed, steady, not dramatic, and don't scroll, listen to this, because God does His deepest work when life feels almost ordinary again, when the storms pass and you're left with clarity instead of chaos. And your heart needs this right now because clarity can feel strange after years of confusion, and listen carefully, because confusion was never your destiny, it was a season meant to teach discernment, and don't scroll, listen to this, because discernment is what allows you to recognize real love without needing it to hurt first, and your heart needs this right now because you've mistaken pain for proof before, and listen to this truth, God does not require suffering to validate love. He refines love so it doesn't require suffering, and don't scroll, listen to this. Because refinement has been happening inside you quietly, in how you respond, in what you tolerate, in what you no longer chase, and your heart needs this right now because you are no longer chasing love, you are attracting alignment, and listen closely, because attraction rooted in wholeness feels calm, not obsessive. And don't scroll, listen to this, because calm once felt unfamiliar to you, maybe even suspicious. And your heart needs this right now because calm is not a warning sign, it's a green light, and listen carefully, because you may have noticed that your prayers have changed, less asking for signs, more thanking God for peace, less bargaining, more trusting, and don't scroll, listen to this. Because that shift is powerful, and your heart needs this right now because trust moves things forward faster than fear ever could, and listen closely, because fear tries to keep you busy, anxious, alert, while trust allows God to work without interference, and don't scroll, listen to this, because interference often looks like overthinking, replaying conversations, imagining outcomes that haven't happened, and your heart needs this right now because you may have noticed those habits loosening their grip, and listen carefully, because that didn't happen by accident, it happened because your nervous system is healing, and don't scroll, listen to this. Because healed nervous systems recognize safety instead of mistaking chaos for chemistry, and your heart needs this right now. Because safety is where love grows roots, and listen closely, because roots are invisible at first, but they hold everything later, and don't scroll, listen to this, because God builds roots before He grows branches, and your heart needs this right now because what's coming is meant to last, not just impress, and listen carefully, because the answer God gave your soulmate included patience, not delay, and don't scroll. Listen to this. Because patience is not waiting in fear, it's resting in trust, and your heart needs this right now because resting does not mean nothing is happening, it means everything is being arranged, and listen closely, because arrangement looks like timing lining up, circumstances softening, conversations preparing themselves without force, and don't scroll, listen to this. Because you may have noticed that life hasn't been pushing you aggressively in any direction lately. And your heart needs this right now because gentle direction is still direction, and listen carefully, because God often leads through peace, not pressure, and don't scroll, listen to this, because pressure creates resistance, while peace creates openness. And your heart needs this right now because openness allows recognition to arrive naturally, and listen closely, because recognition is how you'll know when the moment is right, not because someone convinces you, but because your body relaxes, your mind quiets, and your spirit settles, and don't scroll, listen to this. Because settling does not mean settling for less, it means settling into alignment, and your heart needs this right now because alignment feels supportive, not draining, and listen carefully, because you may have noticed that you are no longer willing to entertain almost connections, mixed signals, or emotional ambiguity, and don't scroll, listen to this, because that boundary is essential. And your heart needs this right now because covenant-level love does not thrive in ambiguity, it thrives in clarity, and listen closely, because clarity does not rush, it arrives when both hearts are ready to hold it without fear, and don't scroll, listen to this, because fear once rushed you into misalignment, and your heart needs this right now because you've learned that lesson deeply, and listen carefully, because wisdom now guides you more than desire, and don't scroll, listen to this, because wisdom feels quiet but powerful, and your heart needs this right now because wisdom protects your future, and listen closely, because the answer God gave your soulmate wasn't just about you, it was about both of you becoming people who can walk together without losing yourselves, and don't scroll, listen to this, because losing yourself was never part of the plan, and your heart needs this right now because God's design includes wholeness, not sacrifice of identity, and listen carefully, because you may have noticed that you feel more comfortable being alone lately, not lonely, but complete, and don't scroll, listen to this, because completeness attracts partnership instead of dependency, and your heart needs this right now because partnership is built on two whole people choosing each other, not two wounded people trying to heal through each other, and listen closely, because healing has been happening independently on both sides, and don't scroll, listen to this, because independence strengthens union, and your heart needs this right now because union without independence creates imbalance, and listen carefully, because you are no longer meant for imbalanced love, and don't scroll, listen to this, because balance feels steady, and steady feels like trust, and your heart needs this right now because trust is the foundation of marriage, not excitement alone, and listen closely, because excitement comes and goes, but trust holds when life gets real, and don't scroll, listen to this, because real life requires partnership, communication, patience, and grace, and your heart needs this right now because grace is what allows love to survive seasons of difficulty, and listen carefully, because God prepares hearts for grace before He brings them together, and don't scroll, listen to this, because preparation is happening right now even if you don't see it externally. And your heart needs this right now because external proof is not the first sign of alignment, internal peace is. And listen closely, because peace has been growing inside you. Quietly, steadily, without forcing, and don't scroll, listen to this, because that peace is the clearest confirmation you're being guided, not stalled, and your heart needs this right now because stalled feels heavy, guided feels supportive, and listen carefully, because the reason the answer will leave you stunned is because when it finally reveals itself, it will feel obvious in a way that makes you smile instead of panic, like realizing everything you went through was shaping you for this exact moment, and don't scroll, listen to this, because hindsight will bring gratitude, not regret, and your heart needs this right now because regret belongs to lessons not learned, and you have learned, deeply, and listen closely, because this part ends here not to leave you searching, but to let this truth settle gently. The truth that something sacred has been prayed over, something meaningful has been answered, and something lasting is still unfolding in perfect timing, and don't scroll, listen to this, because what God is aligning for you will not rush you, will not confuse you, and will not cost you your peace, and your heart needs this right now to trust that when the moment arrives, it will feel natural, grounded, and unmistakably right. Like everything finally falling into place without force, and the universe quietly whispering, "Now you're ready."